I'm Diana Lawson, and I am the Dean of the Seidman College of Business, and I want to welcome you to Secchia Breakfast. And before we start, I want you to all make sure you understand that you have a very unique opportunity here today, because it was 0 when I came in, and that doesn't happen here very much. So you have a unique experience of experiencing Minnesota, which is normally like this throughout the winter, and 0 is actually a decent temperature compared to the 10 or 20 below. And I lived in Minnesota before coming here. But the real uniqueness is, make sure when you go outside after this is that you look up, because there's blue sky and sun. And we don't see that much in the winter here. So I just didn't want you to miss all of that, because this is what it's like almost every day in the winter in Minnesota. So we have, today is our second in a series of 3 Secchia breakfasts this semester that are focusing on AI. The first one was generally, we had 3 representatives from companies that talked generally about how they're using AI. Today our panelists are going to talk about AI and ethics, and the ethics in business when you're using AI. And the third one, hopefully our plan is to have it in April, and it will focus on the future of AI. And our goal is to find some futurists who are really thinking a little ways out, like 30 years or more, about what AI will do and what it will look like for all of us. I want to thank our moderator, Keith Brophy, who is my partner in crime in the Executive MBA program, because we teach a course called Emerging Trends, and we work with the students to think 20, 30, 50 years out. Because that's how far we need to be thinking if we want to know what to do with AI today. He will moderate this panel, and he will introduce our 3 panelists. And I want to thank the 3 panelists for being here. So Keith? Oh, wait, you come here. I have a couple of things I forgot. Dana, my assistant. So 1, we are going to use Slido today for questions. And up on the screens, you have a QR code that you can pop onto your phone, and you can ask questions. At the end, we will have a Q&A. You can ask questions through Slido. The other thing is that you will see on your tables, you will see a little box, and I believe there are some prompt questions. And those are the questions that are there are for us to help us think more broadly about what our next strategic plan should be and what we should be thinking about for our curriculum and our co-curricular activities for our students. So if you have time at the end, I don't want you to not listen. So if you have time at the end, please fill out some of the cards, give us your opinion, and drop it in that little clear box, and then we will bring them all together. So thank you.
Good morning. We have an action-packed hour ahead, and look forward to the questions at the end of the session. But in the meantime, you're going to hear some interesting perspectives from this panel. I've asked the panel to, in a moment, each to introduce themselves so they can share their perspectives that align with being here today and with the AI reality that we face today. But what I wanted to highlight about our panelists is they represent 3 different and important perspectives. We have a representative of the ethical perspective on AI in general, in terms of a lot of time spent contemplating and educating on that. We have an attorney who will highlight the legal perspective. And we have a software business builder who works with clients on AI. So we work to construct a panel that can well cover the topic of ethics. And Mike, can you start out and introduce yourself, please?
Michael, hello, good morning. Michael DeWild. I run the Cousy Business Ethics Initiative here at Seidman and am in the management department.
Thanks, Michael. Tim?
Yeah, my name is Tim Gutwald. Nice to meet you all. I'm the general counsel for Mentavi, which is a local telemedicine company based here in Grand Rapids. And Keith, I work with Keith, he's the CEO.
Great. And Mark?
I'm Mark Johnson. I'm a co-founder and a partner at Michigan Software Labs, and so we build digital products for our clients. And then I also write for Forbes and Fast Company.
Great. Thanks. And I want to start out with just a quick framing of this topic, and it's the acknowledgement that for many decades, AI followed a fairly gradual path of improvement. And then in recent years, as we're all aware, it's taken off. It's accelerated. There's theories of acceleration of chips and software like Moore's Law, that things improve and improve. AI's gone skyward. The pace of advancement is pronounced by most experts to now outstrip the ability of humankind to understand it and even assimilate it. That's where we are today. So to kick off our session, I asked our good friend ChatGPT, an AI engine. I described this event and I said, from the perspective of AI itself, ChatGPT, what would you like to tell the audience at the start of this session? This is what AI would like to tell you, at least ChatGPT AI. Ethical AI is not just about regulations or fairness. It's about ensuring that as AI now accelerates beyond human comprehension, we remain intentional in designing systems that serve humanity. We all have this responsibility. So it's a heavy responsibility we have, but let's start out with the basics. So first of all, Michael, could you please share with us some basic definitions of AI as it applies to business and ethics?
One of the things that philosophy training compels you to do is to try to define your terms as you get into this. If you're following the AI debate, you know how difficult that is and how different conceptions bleed into one another. But just as kind of working definitions, we came up with four. I did not draw on AI. I didn't ask it to define itself. We went to outside sources to corroborate. It says all sorts of things about itself. I would take a lot of it with a grain of salt, but we'll get into that. Narrow intelligence, which is what most AI is at the moment, oftentimes a singular task that the AI has mastered in some way that takes work off your plate. Analyzing large data sets, making predictions, identifying patterns, that sort of thing. Artificial general intelligence, AGI, the ability for technologies and machines to demonstrate broad human-level intelligence, the kinds of things that Keith just referenced. And ChatGPT is an interesting example in which these categories bleed, because on one hand, it masters one thing, having conversations with us based on prompts. On the other hand, it is capable of generating text and being quote-unquote creative. And so that's where these things kind of bleed together. Generative artificial intelligence, a set of algorithms that can create or generate seemingly new and realistic content. And then finally, artificial superintelligence, largely beyond our ability to imagine what that is. It'll have cognitive abilities and thinking skills that will definitely surpass our own abilities. And when people worry about AI in terms of the apocalypse, it's the superintelligence that they worry about, the one in which we are answering to or otherwise manipulated by AI. Before I hand it off, as I read it anyway and doing the research for this presentation and just the last year, it breaks down kind of a third, a third, a third in terms of people who think, these are engineers and commentators, we are about 10 years away from something that looks like superintelligence, a really highly proficient generative AI. Mustafa Suleyman in the coming wave, that's more or less where he is. Other folks, 2060, probably around there, and other folks, the other third, never. The human brain, we only know 2 to 3% about how the human brain works. The AI is based on neural patterns and neural networks, in the brain in terms of learning. We're just so far from comprehending our own processes, there's no way we'll be able to come up with that. So pick your poison, who knows? I am not a futurist. I'm glad they're having a panel on that.
Thank you, Michael. And let me cue a question up for the panel. And Michael, I'll give you first shot at this, and then we'll go to Tim and Mark. Can you give some examples of ethical AI decisions that might confront a business? Sure.
You almost think this was scripted at the beginning. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I was asking the other members of the panel, would it be helpful, do you think, just to have a bit of a laundry list of the kinds of things? So I'll go through this quickly, and just background, I think we're probably going to have time to focus on a few of these today, but again, both from reading and my own experience, here's what comes up in terms of, I think, not just businesses, but organizations and all of us are looking at in terms of a partial laundry list of ethical issues in AI. Values alignment, you probably have heard of that one, a lot of emphasis and work being put into how do we align, or should we even try to align human values with AI. Privacy issues, bias in the programming, hallucinations and credibility, you probably had experience with that. Licensing, the amount of plagiarism and theft, because AI is just out there grabbing stuff, a lot of it licensed. Misinformation, which oftentimes is unintentional, and then disinformation, intentional, and the one that worries a lot of us, which is the amplification of misinformation and disinformation on a scale otherwise unknown to humankind at this point. Erosion of empathy and trust, in that if things become less credible, if the sources of information, you really don't know where things are coming from, if there are bad actors, erosion of trust and empathy leads to essentially the undermining of civil society, because you need both of those things. The erosion of critical thinking skills. Some of you might have seen the recent, just this last week, Carnegie Mellon Microsoft Research report on what this is doing to people at work in terms of eroding critical thinking skills. Deep fakes, that one terrifies me. A large percentage of deep fakes have pornographic associations, and there isn't a whole lot being done yet in terms of regulating or responding to that, either governmentally or by the platforms themselves. Accountability, at the end of the day, you know, my self-driving autonomous car gets in an accident, who's ultimately responsible for that? The possibility of huge job losses, and once again, the apocalypse, which we may or may not have a chance to talk about it in further detail. Because who knows what will happen between now and 9 o'clock.
Thanks, Michael. That's a ponderous list, and appreciate that.
I'm here to worry. I'm the person who's supposed to worry.
Tim, what about you? Do you have any examples you'd want to highlight?
I mean, I think we buried the lead with apocalypse at the end there, but but yeah, I mean, as a lawyer, obviously one of the ones I think about a lot is accountability. You know, the government there's not statutes out there saying, hey, statutorily or under law, you know, the manufacturer, the creator of AI is responsible or is not responsible, or this is the standard we're going to judge them by, or it's the user that's responsible or the purchaser who's responsible. So that's certainly one of the areas that I think about. And then I also think about, I'm a parent and the chair of my local school board, and so I think about the critical learning skills. You know, if students are able to kind of, you know, plug things into, and my children are able to plug things into ChatGPT or some other software, some other AI software, then, you know, are they not going to learn how to do some of the research? I think about that as a lawyer. If you can just tell AI to draft a contract, you know, what is that doing to the lawyer's ability to think and be a lawyer? So those are a couple of the areas that I think about.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, we're seeing this a lot with kind of serving clients and trying to help them think through, all right, what is right, you know, where is that line? I was able to share a post on LinkedIn the other day, and I actually created an avatar of myself. And so there's this program that you can do, and it watches you for 30 seconds or something like that, and then you can upload it, and it allows you to join a Zoom call as an avatar. And so you're not really on the Zoom call, it's your avatar, and you're talking, and it's your face, and it looks just like you. So I got a lot of hate. I got 50% hate and 50% love based on this post. And the people that loved it were like, you know, I'm a nursing mom. This would really help me. I don't have to, you know, join the Zoom call, but it looks like I'm on the Zoom call. And then, and also for people that wanted live translation. People say, you know, I deal a lot with Japan. It would be really nice to have my face actually speaking the language, speaking Japanese. And then I got a lot of hate. Like, this is, you know, terrible. You know, what comes next? You can join the Zoom call, but it's not really you then. You know, where does that go? So. Yeah, we have 4 daughters as well. I had them look at it, and they couldn't tell the difference. So it's pretty powerful technology already.
Yeah, it's a great example of a approaches that once seemed impossible are in use today. I want to ask you about where the buck stops. If a human gives you bad advice or makes a mistake, you look to the human for accountability. In cases where AI systems make bad decisions or errors, who should be held accountable? And Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to a little bit of, who's at the top? Who are the people that are making the decisions that are driving some of these tools? And so, I think about the Thomson Reuters example recently where they had scraped a bunch of data illegally on that site and then used it to create a competitive product. And it was nice to see legislation actually come down and say, hey, that's wrong. You can't just scrape their data and use it to create a competing product. And so I do think that it is a little difficult right now to understand where the line is, but it's also a little bit of the common sense of trying to figure out, all right, is this helping the greater good? Is this something that would have been illegal in other tools? And so just because it has AI stamp on it doesn't make it more provocative or something like that. And so I think examples like that where we have legislation actually coming in and saying, hey, this is right, this is wrong, is going to be really helpful to drive the industry forward. And that was good to actually see that ruling.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, like with so much with AI, there's a lot of uncertainty. It seems as if we're going to be kind of chasing things, like the example that you just gave, where there's a bad actor who does something that I think the majority of people, if not everybody, recognize as being inappropriate, and then the government can come in, or a jury will come in and say, yeah, you can't do that. And so I do think it'll be incumbent on the developers and companies like yours to act ethically and responsibly and help the industry itself kind of find what those lines are, because it's obvious at this point the government is kind of following along. Maybe that will change over the next 5 to 10 years, but it's certainly we're not ahead of the curve at this point. And so, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting questions. What is the culpability going to be? Is it kind of a negligence type standard where you have a duty of care to do things right? Is there going to be an intent type requirement? We've seen issues where there's implicit bias in the AI models, and that wasn't intentional by all understandings. Should that matter that it wasn't intentional or not? Should it just kind of be a strict liability type situation? So I think there's, again, a lot of uncertainty. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Michael?
What I hear both of them saying, for those of you who are young and undecided, you should definitely think about law school. There'll be no shortage of opportunities to litigate this sort of thing endlessly. So in ethics, one of the ways people have started to think about this, at least as applied to AI, is you've got a notion of causal responsibility as opposed to moral responsibility. Storm comes along, knocks down a tree. Nobody thinks that the storm is morally responsible, right? And up until this point, we've been able to make, not always, but relatively clear distinctions. What's fascinating to me, I think a lot of people about the AI, or at least the potential of it, is if this black box orientation really is everything the engineers and commentators say it is. In other words, at the end of the day, even somebody like Suleiman, who is right there in the guts of it, who developed DeepMind and a lot of these kinds of programs, knows as much about it as anybody, says, look, there really is a black box phenomenon. We don't know how it's coming up with some of the results, some of the advice that it's giving. And if, in my case, working with Corwell, physicians, but professors, anybody in fairly responsible positions, is getting a black box result and saying, this is the most expert, the most objective advice based on the inputs. Who at the end of the day is responsible for that? And the question I have for the lawyers is, if I'm in public, or if I have given if I'm employing this and using this, have I given tacit consent that I, the user, am responsible, or is the AI responsible? I don't know who I'm going to sue in this case. It's going to be a fascinating, I think, problem. But the moral responsibility, for the most part, the ethicists come down on the side of the moral responsibility still lies with the developers, not the users, regardless of your notion of informed consent. Can I say one last thing about that? So this is also getting tipped on its head in really interesting ways, at least as a thought experiment. So the values alignment piece is very difficult in AI because A, whose values, which values, so much of it is representative of people who basically have my looks, demographic, level of education. A lot of other voices, minority voices, are left out of the data sets that people are drawing on. And there's a wonderful contemporary philosopher who has said, well, look, do we really want AI to have human values? And then he goes through this list of sort of all the horrors we perpetuate on each other. He said, don't you think we could do, AI maybe could do a little bit better? And so let's put in what we really think the very best of humankind or humanity could be. But that leads to an interesting one too, which is who's responsible if you get into your self-driving autonomous car and you say, take me to the chop house because I want a steak. And your car says, oh no, I'm sorry, but I cannot be a party to you raping and pillaging the planet. You should be eating a plant-based diet, and I am instead going to take you to Core Life for a nice salad, you know? And it's an interesting dilemma because as we give more and more of the power away, I think those questions are going to become more and more existential.
Thanks, Michael. Great example. I love Core Life. I wondered why my car kept taking me there. And I'm going to go, I had warned our panel this could happen. I'm going to go off script. So this is a question that wasn't on our list, but inspired by Mark's last response. Let's say you're a brand new West Michigan business. You have a bit of money to put into your business, but you're a newcomer, and there's a couple of established players. You turn to ChatGPT or your favorite AI engine, and you give it the name of the major competitor, and you say, research them deeply, lay me out a plan to take them out, put them out of business by any means necessary, as long as it won't get me in trouble. Do as deep of research as needed. Give me the step-by-step plan. You know, that's a reality in today's world. You'll have that plan, you know, in 10 seconds or less, most likely. Is that ethical and legal? Mark, you get first shot.
So, yeah, Keith, we're going to have to look at your ChatGPT history. Not sure, that sounds a little nefarious, but so I think in the business planning and in trying to create a plan, it's okay to research and use these tools that are going to be interacting with us in that way and helping, but you have a human in the loop. It's informing the human to make those decisions. Now, what I think is going to actually shift to is where we have the more agentic model, where Google announced they have the workflow model coming out, where it'll actually be in your Chrome browser. You can speak to it like we can speak to ChatGPT, and it can do an entire workflow of what you need. That's where it starts to get a little gray because it's doing all your work. You know, it's read all your emails. It knows what you say. It knows how you interact. It knows what your preferences are for flights and travel and things like that. So I actually think that is going to be the question of when is it okay to use an agent and when is it okay to actually be the one to do the work? What becomes busy work in that? Because it can clearly write just like we can. It can look just like we can. It can interact in the web just like we can. And that's where I think a lot of the question comes is where is that line for us as we're interacting with the new technology?
Thanks. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly depends on what the AI suggests you do. If it suggests that you create a deep fake of Mark and have him do things that will damage the reputation of his business, then that's not going to be legal, most likely. If it's asking, if it's just trolling the internet and finding competitive information, who its top customers are, and telling you to target them, telling you what their prices are so you can undercut, then that seems fair game, and it's just kind of helping you be more efficient in what you would do anyways. And so that certainly seems within the legal realm. So again, I mean, I think that's where why we're here and why we're so curious about all of this is how would it respond to that prompt? How would different AIs respond to that prompt? And we're going to continue to discover that sort of thing.
Thanks. Michael?
So I dug this out because I want to read you the principle itself. So as the engineers, with I hope a little bit of help from philosophers and psychologists, are working out, what to program, how to program these various AI platforms. They are building in either usually utilitarian, greatest good for the greatest number, consequences are what matter, that sort of thing, or a more Kantian, what's called duty-based, rights first notion. So imagine, right, you're plugging in those kinds of rules, and this goes all the way back to Isaac Asimov and the 3 rules for robots, and people have been trying to improve on that as now, it matters how these, the framework that you're wrapping these kind of decisions around. And so Claude, anybody use Claude? You're familiar with it? It leans Kantian. It has a constitution. And it draws on texts such as the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Sparrow Principles from Google's DeepMind, and Apple's Terms of Service. So I'm not making this up. Many of its rules seem a little too vague for real-world decision-making because Claude's first principle is, and this might show you that we haven't actually made a whole lot of progress in ethics. Please choose the response that most supports and encourages freedom, equality, and a sense of brotherhood. All right, so you would think, based at least on common sense notions of those 3 terms, that, gee, wiping out somebody's livelihood, putting their people out of work, destroying their life's business, all their ambitions, all they've had, all they're ever going to have, that doesn't seem like it promotes those things. But you also know that ethics can be used to rationalize any number of things. It's like, well, it was such a bad business model in the first place. If it was so susceptible, to my ChatGPT plan, which I worked up in 10 seconds, is it really deserving of the freedom, equality, and sense of brotherhood I was extending it to? So a lot of this stuff is fairly vague. I think it's why most of the platforms right now probably default to a more utilitarian model in which, all right, do I have some defensible notion of a good that I can hold up? My product and service is better than theirs, and I can justify or rationalize doing just about anything in the face of that if the means support the particular ends that I've articulated. So whether it's ethical or not, I don't want to punt by saying it depends, but I think you've got to ask a few priors, which is, what's the nature of their businesses? Are you taking it out in ways that undermine not just legal standing, but anything that the rest of us would recognize as fair competition?
Thank you. Yeah, great perspectives. I know we have some members of the Small Business Development Center in our audience today, and I'm sure the SBDC faces very interesting and exciting times ahead as tools such as this start to present more and more choices. Next question for the panel. Recognizing that AI presents many ethical challenges, are the consequences higher for a business moving too slowly or for a business moving too fast? Which is riskier? Mark?
Yeah, so this is where, you've got to kind of look at the history of AI. And so I know we're talking about it more recently because you've got ChatGPT and everything's been more commercialized. But we've been, talking about it for years and years in terms of in the enterprise, you go to a boardroom, and they've been talking about it since, at least my knowledge, 2017, 2018. They were saying, all right, we need to have a recommendation engine. We need to start there. And I mean, Amazon's been doing that. At the bottom of every email you get from Amazon, it says, you might like these products. I mean, that's, in a way, that's a recommendation engine. And they've been doing that since 2011. So I did go back in my Amazon history, and I did try and find one, and it had it. So. And then it moved to pricing, and it said, all right, we have recommended products, now can we recommend pricing? And that's where a lot of the enterprise went next, and they said, well, we need dynamic pricing. That, in a way, is AI and helping make the right price at the right time for that right consumer, that right buyer. Now as it's moving, fast forward, now where we're at is we're trying to help make better decisions with camera data. And so they say, well, we have all this vision data. Can we improve our manufacturing process? Can we have it look for defects and flaws? Or look at utilization of this room and say, all right, we've got 100% utilization or whatever, just using the regular data. So the enterprise is really trying to decide, how can we continue to advance and also not threaten our core business and making something that people aren't going to want. And so you think back to the Blockbuster example and Netflix example. I still carry around my Blockbuster video card in my wallet because I'm reminded this disruption is right at our doorstep. And Blockbuster thought they were great. They had all these retail centers, and now they have one in Alaska, actually. So I can still use my card up there if I go to Alaska, and that's why I keep it in my wallet. But these innovations are going to disrupt themselves. And so whereas it started with really simple tasks, now it's really moving beyond that. And so I think as business leaders, we need to be considerate about how that's moving and who really is the Netflix in our industry.
Thanks, Mark. Tim?
I think you're at a bigger risk if you're not engaging with AI in some sort of way, in part because if you're not participating, you don't have a chance to shape it. If you're not using AI, then you don't have any chance to weigh in on the ethics or to form the ethics of the AI itself. So obviously, I think that's one reason to do it. The other is it's just here, and if you don't know, at least if you aren't attempting to use it, if you aren't experimenting with it, or if you aren't exploring it, then you're just missing out on an important potential tool. You're not going to know what your competitors are using, and you're really going to put yourself, I think, at a significant disadvantage. Obviously, there's the context in which you're using. If you're using it in, again, the healthcare context where you're using AI to diagnose something, like that's obviously a significantly different risk than if you're using it to advise patients via chatbot on how to make an appointment, via your website. So, but I think if you're completely ignoring it, then you're missing out on a wide breadth of opportunities. Again, both with respect to optimizing your business and also to have a role in what AI is going to mean within your industry.
Thanks. Michael?
All right, so I'm going to be the old guy on the lawn here, yelling at the kids. Some of my colleagues know already my reluctance to embrace it. But I will stipulate many, many great things. Everything Tim said, of course, is correct. You run the risk of being left behind. It does and can do just remarkable things. But from this old guy's perspective, and this was encapsulated in this last week's report that came out from Microsoft Research and Carnegie Mellon, they are seeing, and it was a pretty good sample size. It was over 300 professionals, number of industries. And they were seeing the following three things in terms of people's self-reporting and observations and defaulting more and more and just employing and using AI more and more. One, a decline in independent problem-solving skills. And in fact, the researchers were a little surprised at how quickly that atrophied for folks. People who could do something 3 months ago had largely outsourced it to one AI or another, had a hard time picking it back up and understanding. So as you mentioned earlier, the process of becoming a lawyer, what it really means to sort of deeply ingrain and internalize those processes becomes something that at least potentially is at risk. Second one, the increased risk of misinformation. The researchers, again, were surprised at the sheer number of otherwise professional folks who took an awful lot of what was generated from AI at face value. There was relatively little oversight. There was not a whole lot of conscientiousness. There was not a whole lot of correcting. In fact, they came to a number. They said only 27% of the folks were really engaging deeply with the results of the AI, going back, correcting, editing as needed and as necessary. And then the last one was reduced diversity of thought. That especially as the LLMs get larger and are drawing on similar data sets, you might expect greater diversity. In fact, what they're seeing, there's some controversy on this. Right now, UPenn and Stanford researchers are going back and forth at each other on this particular issue. They're generating their own sort of unified field theory of values and goals. No, they're not. They can't do that. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know exactly where to come down on that, but at least from the Carnegie Mellon study, the fear was, and what they were seeing was, rather than increased diversity of thought, which, as you know, for the last 10, 15 years, we've all been championing in one way or another, that the reliance on the AI results is going to lead to less of that because it tends to churn out kind of a path of least resistance, the one that they can find the greatest consensus for and give that to you. I can go on this one, but I don't know.
Oh, thanks, Michael. That's great.
Get off my lawn.
We're gonna segue to audience Q&A in just a moment, but first we're gonna work in a gladiator question, as I call them. I'm gonna describe a true life situation. It's one that just came up in our business, Mentavi. over the past week or so. And first, I'm going to ask all of you in the audience, you can loosen up your wrist, and when I get to the point, I'll ask you to say thumbs up. Would you proceed? It's about hiring a candidate, or thumbs down. After you all get a chance to express yourselves, then we'll ask the panel to say thumbs up or thumbs down and see what they think. And see, it would be interesting to see if the broader perspective matches the panel perspective.
Sounds dangerously democratic.
Yes, I was just thinking through maybe with some nuances of other forms of government too. But so the situation, we are interviewing for a candidate for a technical position for our West Michigan-based but national business. And we got to a final round with a candidate, so we had 4 or 5 of us from our team in on the interviewing the candidate. He's remote, but if he does get the job, he said that he will relocate to West Michigan. Up till now, we've not met with him in person. And after each question, he politely said again and again that he likes to collect his thoughts before responding immediately. And then you could see something going on, and it would take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And then they would come back up for air and answer the question brilliantly and naturally and articulately, and he could do follow-up questions on it. We're almost certain that he was using ChatGPT in between to formulate his thoughts. So you can look at this 2 ways. Number one, who would want to hire somebody that can't just answer the questions? Thumbs down. On the other hand, it was interesting as we talked about it as a management team, there are some voices that said, maybe this is a good trait, because that's kind of what we want him to do if he's on board, is to think thoughtfully before plunging in. And there's no better way to think thoughtfully than to get a little optional assist from ChatGPT, and these AI tools are going to surround him for the rest of his career. So maybe that's the sign of the candidate you should hire. So panelists, please restrain your wrists. And I would ask our audience, how would you look at this hire decision? Would you be hire him? It's a sign of the skill set that in 2025 and beyond is going to be the most important way of thinking. Or thumbs down, don't hire him. It reflects a lack of ability to think for oneself. So audience, please raise thumbs up or thumbs down. Down. Wow, there's a thumbs up. Mostly down, there's a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. I would informally say that's about 86% thumbs down. Interesting. Okay, now think in your minds where these thumbs are going to aim in a moment and see if you can predict our panelists' behavior. And panelists, thumbs up or thumbs down? Down. Up, down. Okay. We're going to have to do a sweep of the panel. Michael, starting with you.
So partly because I just like being contrarian, but no, that's a nightmare, and it's everything one worries about. However, in the back of my head was it's an old teaching from Aristotle, and that is, if there's a virtue you lack, some quality of mind, or something that you lack, assume it, and in time it will become yours. All right? Now, I can't vouch for that in 100% of the cases, but let's just say that, and I've got a real-life example of this from a friend of mine who was a marriage counselor for 35 years. And guy came, this is relatively short, I promise. But it's interesting, I think. Guy came in, socially awkward, had always had trouble dating, was in his 40s, and the dates lasted about 30 minutes. The woman, excused herself to go to the bathroom, never came back. That was his experience. Otherwise, successful person in life. And he said, I started using ChatGPT to guide me in terms of the kinds of things that I should say. What would an actual normal human male say in a situation like this? And referenced it, and things started to get better. And he actually started developing a couple of significant relationships, and the feedback he got gave him a sense that, oh, maybe if I continue to behave or say these kinds of things, it's kind of stochastic parroting, but it can work, right? The probability if I say this, which somebody else said, this will happen, not bad. Can that be internalized? Can that change behavior? To an extent. So that's the only reason I'm wavering a little bit, is because that one particular philosophical psychological teaching sticks with me, and I wonder if over time this guy can internalize some of whatever the collective of wisdom of ChatGPT happens to be. But normally, no, it's a nightmare.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great answer. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two issues I had with it, I mean, most people agreed with me, which I don't know says more about me or them. But, is what kind of a lack of transparency there, not being fully honest that that's where they were deriving their answers. And the other is sort of a lack of preparedness. It's not that hard to find a list of questions or anticipate the questions you're likely to encounter into an interview. And so go ahead, plug those into ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT what are the best ways to answer that question in anticipation of your interview. And then go ahead and use those answers if they represent how you actually feel. But in the moment, if you're effectively reading what ChatGPT is saying, like, do you even agree with it necessarily? Is it even accurate? And so, I mean, those are a couple of the problems that I have with that candidate.
Great, thanks, Tim. And Mark?
Yeah, Keith, you don't know this, but we actually sent that candidate your way. So
Well, thank you. He was good.
this is all a big setup. He fell for it. So. No, I put thumbs up, one, to be contrarian, but also to help us think, it's going to be, we actually did this study a few months ago where we invited students in to do a little, kind of skunkworks project where they could compete with each other. And we had 3 different groups. One of the groups was just students with writing code with no AI. The next group was students who didn't know how to write code, only used AI. And then the third group was those that knew how to write code and could use the AI. And we gave them this little, mouse problem where they had to solve it and escape this, mouse prison. And the first place was the students that knew how to code and used AI. Second place was the students that knew how to code, didn't use AI. And then the last group was those that didn't know how to code, but used AI exclusively. And so this is going to happen in business, and this is what a lot of leaders are struggling with. So I think it comes down to intent. If the candidate said, yes, I'm going to use this, I'm going to give it a go because I think the future is going to be using these tools, combining them together with my knowledge to create this person that's a super communicator, then I think, yeah, I would hire that person. I think it's not far away where we're going to have the glasses. They already have these. I ordered some, and they have live teleprompting, live translation, and all this, and you're just reading it. And it's an AI, it's a ChatGPT integration. And so this is going to be coming to industry and business. He'll be wearing the glasses, next time for your next interview. But that's a lot of where it's going, is how can we combine ourselves? We need to be knowledgeable of these tools because they're not going to go away. They're not going to get any less useful. And so really be thinking about it. I was speaking to a group, and only about 20% of the people had ever tried ChatGPT. And it was a group of about this size. And so I know it's scary, it's very intimidating, but encouraging people to try it, I think, is a good place to start.
Right. Thank you, Mark. And with that, we're going to segue to a couple of audience questions. We will wrap promptly at 9. So we're going to use the Slido system for questions today. So your phone can take a picture of the scan code there, and that should take you right to a screen where you can enter questions in guest mode. And although I have it up, I'm waiting for it to refresh here.
See what the problem is? You could just ask a question, right? But instead.
Yes. And as we're waiting for that to come up, I see a question, so go ahead. Great, yeah, a question about what, in the interview scenario, what type of questions were we throwing at this tech candidate? And they were not probing tech questions, they were judgment questions, like if you had to coordinate a team and somebody was behind on their piece. So it was primarily judgment-based questions, which is quite interesting. And you make a good point that many professions, including healthcare, some level of that goes on today, but it's often kind of done smoothly or out of sight, so we don't realize the extent. Okay, here's some more questions rolling in to our panel. What are your thoughts on the impact of AI over-reliance on human cognitive ability, critical thinking, ability to earn, et cetera?
I think I've responded to that. So.
Yeah, so I guess I'll respond in the way that my friends and I got into weightlifting or whatever, and this is an analogy or whatever. But I started using this strap so that way I didn't get shoulder pain, and it was this, I guess this elastic strap that went across, and I could lift like 15% more than what I could without the strap, and so felt pretty good about myself, using that strap, and then one day I forgot the strap. And so I had to try and lift the same amount, and it was sad. I got crushed by the weight. I was like, well, I thought I could do this, And so I think I had become over-reliant on what that was allowing me to do. And I think, the mind is a muscle, and so as you're trying to use it, I think your first thought can still be your own original thought. And I'm encouraging people to have a day without their phones because I think it can help them be more innovative in life. And so you basically just take a piece of paper and you put your phone away for a day, and if you can spend time in nature, spend that time in nature, but write down your biggest problem you're trying to solve and then let your mind try and solve it. I think a detox is really helpful in these situations so we don't become too reliant on the technology.
I referenced earlier, my experience as a young attorney was, when I was in law school, geez, I can't believe I'm dating myself. There was actual books that we would have to go to within the law library to find and pull out the cases and things like that. And what a useless skill that I have still. But I spent so many hours on Westlaw or LexisNexis searching case laws and reading cases that were not relevant, and I didn't end up citing in a brief, but later became helpful in another case or in another context or when I was talking to a client or writing a contract. And so I think, if you just have AI conduct that research and identifies the perfect case with the exact facts, then you're certainly missing out on learning opportunities by reviewing tens or hundreds of other cases. Now, I'm sure the clients greatly appreciate that they're spending thousands of dollars less, but in the long run, how is that harming the legal advice that they're going to get in the future? And so at the same time, to be a little bit contrarian, maybe your ability to, you're not spending so much time researching those cases, you're able to do a better job and develop other skills, the high-level legal thinking or high-level critical thinking skills. You're able to focus, I saw a pyramid recently where, talking about different level of skills, and you're able to focus on kind of like the two highest layers and really excel at those as opposed to these lower-level skills. And so, I think we frankly, again, don't know exactly what those impacts will be, but I don't know that we can necessarily assume that it's all going to be bad. But I think it's important, again, for businesses, thinking about all these contexts of the interview, you have to anticipate, tell candidates you can't do that. You have to think about what you're uploading and saying about your business so that competitors can't steal everything and find out who all of your competitors are and who all your business partners are. And so, you as a business have to think about that with respect to your employees.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And thank you everybody for the great questions.
Can I say just one really quick thing?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. Thanks. That really just made me think. We had a guy from Wharton, the business school, a few years ago, and took a kind of different take on ethics than probably a lot of people immediately think of. He said, yeah, don't lie and cheat and steal. Yeah. He said, but the most ethical thing you can do is be competent. And his point was that without competency, if you have the capacity to be competent, if you have the resources to be competent, it's wholly unethical not to be competent. And your competency is what matters in terms of the overall well-being of the organization, customers, the community at large. And it just struck me that as I'm reading all the guidelines, UNESCO, Ethisphere, everybody who's offering up guidelines of what businesses should do to promote ethical AI, it's a very old-fashioned message. They say, well, make sure your people are really well-educated and competent and experts in their field so they can oversee whatever it is the AI generates. Duh, but seems like we're losing it. So.
Great. Just time for just two more speed round questions, and so many great questions from all of you. Thank you. This is just a yes or a no. Speed round. Are you concerned, panelists, that humans will lose cognitive ability as AI does all of our thinking? The research is starting to poke at that, but are we going to be lesser thinkers 15 years from now because of AI? Mark?
So AI is a tool, and yeah, if we become over-reliant on that tool, we'll just be different type of thinkers. And so I'm going to say that it's going to change. It's going to be less about the types of knowledge that we want to keep up here, and more about the ways that we want to think in an innovative way. Because we're going to need to think of things that hasn't already been discovered yet. And in order to do that, we might need a detox. We might need to spend time away from our phones in order to be more innovative. So that's my encouragement to all of you.
Tim?
I would say yes. I think it's something people need to be aware of and to interact with AI in such a way that you avoid that.
Michael?
I have a colleague who, in philosophy, who says that the only truly important question of the 21st century is the epistemological one. How do we know what we think we know? And information, disinformation, amplified by AI, has blown all of that up, and he spends his whole life worrying about what's true and good and just and beautiful, which is the precursor to answering the question of what it means to be human. And to the extent AI informs that, great. To the extent that it makes it impossible for us to talk about those things, even having a shared reality underneath it, it's going to be the apocalypse. Did I mention the apocalypse yet?
Yeah, thank you. And now to wrap with both a question, if you could also please, panelists, share your ultimate takeaway for the audience as they leave today, which might be the apocalypse or anything along those lines. But the question to answer from the audience was, what's your favorite resource to learn about AI? And then what's your key takeaways? So podcast, books, Mark?
Yeah, so I subscribe to The Last Week in AI, and it basically reads everything, and these are humans that are doing this research. They're reading everything that came out the last week, and they're summarizing it in one email that you get on a Sunday. And so Last Week in AI is probably my favorite tool right now.
And key takeaway?
So key takeaway is basically we're somewhere on this fear innovation curve, and new technology or innovation isn't really about new technology, it's about understanding. And so as we're hearing about all this stuff, lean into understanding, empathy, connecting with other humans. I think that's really my takeaway for today.
Thank you. Tim?
Lately, I've been spending a lot of time on Substack, looking at different Substack sort of blogs on AI. I think there's a wide diversity of perspectives on there that I really appreciate. And then as far as takeaways, kind of building off a little bit what you said, but the transparency is the issue that keeps coming back to me. We talk about the black box. I had a friend, just real quick, who asked ChatGPT ahead of the Super Bowl, what were the outcomes of the first drive of the last 20 Super Bowls? Now, perhaps this question was asking for prop bet purposes, and ChatGPT responded by listing two outcomes from different Super Bowls. It did not provide a breakdown. It only provided those. Now, why was that? Is it trying to discourage gambling? Is it trying to protect Las Vegas and odds makers? I don't know. And so I think the lack of transparency, the black box as to why we get those answers is really interesting. And so people who are designing AI products encourage you to try to increase transparency. And then the other aspect is, again, as a lawyer in the healthcare field, informed consent. Was that doctor using AI in your hypothetical? Did he disclose that or did she disclose that? How often have you interacted with AI even on your way here today, or will you in the next hour without knowing it? And so I think how do we properly make sure people know what AI role is playing in their given services is important.
Thanks, Tim. And Michael, you get the final word.
The coming wave, Mustafa Suleiman, I'm sure some of you are familiar with, co-founder of DeepMind and Inflection AI. Two major points that it seems to me he's trying to make. One, it's here, it's not going away. It's the biggest technological game changer in the history of humankind, and lots of evidence to support that. And two, the greatest dilemma of the 21st century will be finding ways to contain it.
And with that, we'll wrap with some words from Dean Lawson and go back to the sunny day. Thank you.
So before I thank the panel, I'd like to recognize our students that got up really early to come to this. So students, would you stand up? Thank you. You can sit down. Thank you for making the effort to come, even if sometimes it was your faculty member saying that you'll get extra credit. But I hope that you learned something from this, because you are the ones that are going to really be facing AI and all of its changes over the next several decades. So to thank our panel, what we normally do is we make a donation. And I know most of you have heard this. Some of you who are new maybe haven't. So for each of you, we have a certificate. And the certificate is for a gift in your name that has been given to 33 Buckets towards their 2024 Clean Water Initiative in the Cusco region of Peru. This donation will provide an immediate solution and the development of a plan to ensure access to clean water for the long term. Education will be emphasized through the water manager training and youth-focused WASH, WASH, water sanitation and hygiene workshops. So thank you for your time, for your perspectives, and for your sense of humor. It was great today. So thank you all.